Now, it was at this point that Fettes and I, we stopped and we wiped our brows, we contemplated the rest of our labor, and it was at this point that I realized we had wasted much time in unearthing the entire grave. Well, it would be much quicker just to open a hole at the head of the grave. With my mattock, I could easily break through the coffin liner and lid, and with my meat hook simply, well, it is rather difficult to explain, really. I think you had to be there. But perhaps I could give you a demonstration. If I could have a volunteer, please. I only use female volunteers, sorry, no offense. Volunteer, please, of the female persuasion. Volunteer, there we are, right to my side. Come here. There we go. Now, here's what we're going to do. You play the corpse, I will play Frank, and the meat hook will portray itself. Now, as I said, I had already opened a hole at the head of the grave. I tie a rope around the trusty meat hook, and I lower it. Yeah, just so we can see. Just back a little bit. There we go. You don't have to go back too far. I just want to make sure I have a good target. Oh, but put the hands down. See, they never covered their neck. No, I would have been out of that graveyard quickly if they covered their neck. So I would lower the meat hook and get it right in place. By the way, indulge me for a moment, if you would. Just everyone, reach right under here. You feel that little indentation? Well, that's pay dirt. So I would lower the hook down. Make sure it wasn't too far to one side or the other. Try to get it right there in the center so I could grab a hold of a good section of meat and bone. And then Fettes would give me a good strong count of 1. You see, Fettes liked suspense. He always took a long time in between the counts. Where were we? Oh yes, 1, 2, 3, and pull the corpse right out of the grave, doing much less damage than one would anticipate. Give this brave corpse some support for her bravery. Thank you, young lady. Well, this was in fact a trick I learned somewhat later on. So at this point, well, Fettes and me, we pried open the coffin lid, rooted the dead woman from her resting place. We inserted the body in the dripping sack and then refilled the grave. Then we took our prize to Davidge Hall. Later that morning, the fruit of our labors was subjected to further indignities in front of a class of gaping medical school students. Such was the beginning of my new career. At least once a week, often even more, I raided a Baltimore boneyard. Now, by and large, these raids were performed without incident. My graveside manner improved to the point that I could be in and out within a half an hour. This was not easy, you see, because in addition to being quick, I also had to be careful. And if a grave watch thought that the grave had been tampered, well, things make it very difficult for the doctors, the students, and myself. So I learned several tricks, and you won't find these in any books. This information is all passed down through oral tradition, you see. Well, one thing I would do is bring a canvas sheet with me, lay it out, shuffle all the dirt onto the sheet. When I was finished, dump that dirt back into the grave. Then you couldn't tell that it had been dug. Occasionally, well, you see, it was not a good idea to go directly from the graveyard, any graveyard, back to Davidge Hall. Even in a sack, a corpse makes a very suspicious-looking bundle. So often I would ditch my prize in some out-of-the-way place, come back later on, retrieve it. But once, this is a true story, once I snuck past a night watchman by dressing the corpse in my coat and in my hat and pretending he was a drunk but living companion. But come on now, Bartleby. You'll catch your death out here with no clothes on. Oh, yes, we did have some good times in the boneyard, yes, we did. But I don't want to give the wrong impression. It was not all fun and games, you see. There were difficult times. Well, winter, for instance. Ground freeze up hard as a rock. You couldn't scrape an inch or two off, let alone 5 or 6 feet. That meant that the school had to do with fewer subjects, and this was a situation that was not good. You see, in addition to supplying subjects for their own medical students, Davidge Hall would also supply them to other schools if subjects were in abundance. Now, typically for $50, I would supply the subject. I would pickle it in a keg of rot gut whiskey, and then I would ship it off. Now, I am told on good authority that the students would either drink the whiskey or sell it to the local pub. Keep that in mind the next time you have a drink. Now, I always fancied, I daydreamed sometimes to pass the time, as we all do. I used to fancy that somehow maybe these kegs would get mixed up in shipment. There'd be some poor tavern keeper in the morning popping open the keg. There'd be a white bloated face staring up at him. I don't know that it ever happened, but we can hope that it did. Well, in addition to winter, perhaps the worst time of the year was, of course, the summer. Now, in summer, you had to deal with putrefaction, decomposition. I will save you most of the details, but suffice it to say that, well, in the most extreme cases, you only had to dig a few feet before some horrible odor would fill your lungs. But I learned a trick, you see, another one of these tricks of the trade. If I was uncertain as to the putrefactive state of a particular grave, well, around Davidge Hall there were always a lot of stray dogs and cats. I would simply take one of these cute little beasties with me and pet it and coo and go down to the grave and then just toss it in. If the animal started having violent convulsions and died within 2 to 3 minutes, I knew to leave that one alone. But if it survived, I merely petted it and went on with my business. But I assure you, a few dogs and cats are the only deaths I was ever responsible for. Yes, there were certain unscrupulous types, if they couldn't find subjects, yes, they would create them. And it was around this time, you see, that the papers were all full of this Burke and Hare nonsense. I know you heard all about it. There was, in fact, the chapbook singers and peddlers of verse used to cry out the songs in the streets and all the local pubs. I know you know the songs, too. Well, let's sing one together. I'll start when you remember it. You jump in. Ruffian pair, the hellish dogs, the villain Burke and... Oh, don't you know it? And the meager Hare. Burke's the butcher, Hare's the thief, Knox the man who buys the beef. Buys the beef, I always thought that was witty. Dr. Knox hired William Burke and William Hare to provide him with subjects for his anatomy lectures. 18 people they killed. Where did they get their victims? Oh, that was Hare's end. Quite a con man he was, you see. Whenever Hare saw some old beldame deep in drink, oh, how he would cousin her. Oh, good day to you, Madam Tough Spot. Would you like to have more to drink? Come to my house. You shall have quarts to drink. He'd cousin them. And once they got him there, or did their handle axe all night to take away their victim's life? No sooner done than in the chest they crammed their lately welcomed guest. You see, they burked their victims. Very strong man, Burke. He'd come up behind them, grab them just like this, suffocate them in a matter of minutes, leaving no telltale signs of violence. And eventually the police caught up with Burke and Hare. Knox, a good doctor, I'm told, took advantage of his position in society, lived out the rest of his days in wealth and seclusion. As for Hare, no one's quite sure what happened to him. Some say he fled Edinburgh after turning Queen's evidence, but I heard that the mob got him, and that they threw him in a vat of lime, and he ended his days as a blind beggar on Princes Street.